You're listening to Ernestly Speaking, the only weekly podcast that covers friends, foes, and anything that goes. And now, for your badass host, Ernest Owens. And we're back for a special edition of Ernestly Speaking with your host, Ernest Owens, myself. Yes, this is a bonus episode that I know so many of you all were not expecting. I've never really done special guests before on my podcast, with the exception, of course, my bestie Jamarcus, but that's kind of like family, so it's a little different. But this was due to a lot of the listeners and the fans that really have been, wanting this conversation. And it's always hard to get guests and figure out, the flow and the vibe, but this just felt really different. And this episode is really a special edition because it's just not myself. And I really wanted to talk about this because it just is staying in the headlines. The streets are talking, the Twitter streets are talking, social media is talking, the blogs are talking, the journalists are talking. And I just felt that this would be a great episode to do a deep dive into, because it seems like every week I've been doing updates for a minute. And, listeners have been asking about, these opportunities to have guests. And when I do my regular show, it's hard to incorporate guests because, I like to get in conversation. So this was just a special edition and a request that came from so many people. And this woman who I have as my special guest, as you all see with the title of the show, is none other than Angela the Kitchenista Davis, who is this incredible, she's incredible. She can cook well. Okay, she knows how to cook, brand. She's an originator at that. She's taken her social media platform, her digital platform, and branding around her cooking, her love and passion of food, and have turned it into this really incredible platform that is inspiring people like me who can cook alright, but can get better. And you all have seen so much about her on Twitter and on social media and in the articles about this recent incident, that's been really going on for a decade, but she's been getting a lot of news lately for speaking out and being someone who's been aggressively and consistently calling out the scam that is known as Darius Crooks. So we're going to be talking with her. She's on the podcast. Welcome,
hello.
Angela.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm surprised, this actually is happening. I'm really, really excited because I've always been hesitant to have guests. I don't know how the audio things work and stuff, but we was able to pull it together. So you're in from where?
I'm excited.
Yeah, you're in Michigan, right now?
Yes, I'm in Detroit.
And I'm in Philadelphia. So, this is a Philly-Detroit, collab.
Yes.
Super excited to have you on. For starters, before we get into the nitty gritty, I just want to say I'm a super fan of your Instagram and your food and your cooking. Before all of this happened, I was a follower. I was just someone who was just looking at the content and how original it is. I have a fiance who he does bartending. He makes original cocktails. And I see how much work he just puts in taking pictures of drinks. And so when I see people do the work around the food and the originality and the effort, right? You have to come up with the recipe. You have to cook it and taste it and try it out so many times. And then you get to the point of then the branding and the photography and the art and things. And what fascinated me a lot about that work is that so many people who follow these pages and look at these accounts and these websites don't understand why, in context, as someone who is a content producer, as a journalist, a writer, that when you see people out in these streets that is cutting corners, just stealing recipes, taking people's intellectual property, taking people's branding, fucking with people's entire body of work, it is serious. Because a lot of people have to understand, when you are an original creator, when you're doing this work from the bottom to the top, and you're coming up with these ideas, and you're putting that money, that hustle, and that time, and you're seeing people in your space, in your intellectual space, your creative space, that is completely remixing and really misrepresenting what this work is, it does warrant people to speak out. And what really, drew my attention to this particular case, because, a lot of people know that I have covered grifters and scammers for many years, and through entertainment and art, through social justice and activism. It's what I do. They said, why were you interested about this story, about this food? I mean, it's interesting, but why do you care? I said, because one, it's an issue that's impacting Black people. And we spend so much time talking about, who's going to hold our community accountable when things happen in our community, right? Because everyone says that, we need to be in a community space where we can hold each other accountable and work with each other and challenge each other and get each other together. Well, that's kind of what I'm doing as someone in journalism. It is my role to speak truth to power, especially when it comes to issues involving directly my community. And the intersections of this is that, I am a Black gay man, and Darius Crooks is as well. And, seeing this happen, what it looks like in our community, our other deeper intersectional community, what type of stereotypes are being perpetuated, what type of misrepresentations are being, put out there, and how that impacts us as a collective. And so there was just so many different issues with this entire situation that really drove my personal interest in it. Just as someone who's an onlooker, someone as a journalist, someone who's a foodie, someone that's Black and gay, and really have been in these social media streets for some time, and recognize that when we see these types of situations happen, we can't be silent. We can't just say, oh, that will work itself out, because we know that they don't work themselves out, because this has been going on for many, many years with various Black women in the food industry, and everyone just thought it was going to take care of itself, and it didn't. And I was like, okay, what role do I have? What platform do I have to do my part? And I think that that's where we're at in this day and age. In 2021, with all of this social media, with all this visibility, there's no excuse for people to say there's nothing they can do. You can retweet, you can share, you can tell your friends not to partake in this. You can do a lot of things. And so I wanted to just set that up for people to just understand the nature of the why. Because too often people make assumptions about why certain people are getting involved. They make their conspiracy theories, they question intention, they do all of that. I don't get paid to do this podcast. I did not pay Angela to come on this podcast. We're not making no coins doing this podcast. We're just people who have been sick and tired of being sick and tired, and of seeing people who have done similar things to me in my career. I know what it's like to see other folks be bullies and be this type of way and get away with it. And I think what's happening right now is a cultural reset where creators and originators are stepping up and saying, you know what, normally they tell me to take the high road, to be the bigger person, but by defending myself and my brand and my reputation, I am being the bigger person. And so I'm just here to be in support and everything. But I just wanted to just lay that premise out there for listeners that are like, why is this happening? Or what's going on? Because sometimes you see it, Angela. People get on social media and they just start crafting their own narratives behind what people's intentions are. And I think it's important to just, reset the room real quick for the listeners.
Of course, because everybody's just a hater, right?
Right, we just a hater. Everybody just mad about this, mad about that. Any critique at a certain level becomes a hater. I mean, the baby thought the same thing, right? And we saw what happened there. Andrew Cuomo thought the same thing, and we see what's going on there. It's a lot of people, Trump, right? People who often just dismiss any type of critique as people being haters, rather than recognizing what is actually being said here. Does this hold merit and weight? Because there's people that can say baseless things and it doesn't hold any weight. And okay, sure, that's hating. But when you got people out here with the receipts and you done burn some bridges,
right,
and then
everybody can't be lying.
Everybody can't be lying. Right. And that's where I stand with this. Like, everybody, all 20 of them, all 30 of them, everybody lying?
Right.
This
is
people from, you got one person,
like when people from 15 years, right. It's just like when you have a whole decade, longer than that, of people from your past speaking up and giving similar stories to that. account for your character, at that point, it's not hating. That's your character.
Facts. So I guess in my mind, where do we start with this? Where for you, because you're the guest, you're the special guest. Where does this start? Where did this come about for people who are new to this?
I think some of the confusion, because it does get misconstrued as this battle between me and Darius Williams.
Mm-hmm.
My interaction with him started in 2014. That was the one interaction I had with him. I blocked him. It was enough. I've spoken extensively about why that was, because the same behaviors he's displaying now with harassing people for sport, screenshotting them to his audience, it was the same stuff he was doing back then, and I wasn't cool with it. On top of that, I had noticed the issues that were just starting to surface about plagiarism. I saw the patterns, and I was like, this is a bad character. I'm staying away. And I left it at that. It came back up the night of the lasagna video. And that was really just a coincidence that somebody tagged me to a tweet where he mentioned my name and something about Angela hates me in response to a tweet that we were both tagged in over a recipe. So it was just timing. It was just, it had nothing to do with his allegation. I'm just the person that was talking about it.
Right, and so to be clear with the lasagna video, because some people know about that. I've talked to some of my, I've said it on some of the episodes, but this lasagna video that Angela is describing is a video where he is doing this recipe, and he's got a lot of attention. And if that's
recipes being generous.
Right. It's a rendition of his interpretation of lasagna, and this is his interpretation, right? It's it reminds me. Okay, so if you're in Philadelphia, and this woman has went viral. Her name is Sadia Schuler, and she owns a restaurant called Country Cooking in Philadelphia. And she gets on not the Breakfast Club, the Shade Room. Sometimes she goes viral because of her renditions of certain dishes. I guess we start calling them renditions rather than recipes. But she basically made mac and cheese, and she put 12 eggs in it. I don't know if you heard about this. This dozen of eggs in this mac and cheese dish, and everyone was just like, whoa, that's too many eggs for this mac and cheese. And she put a huge, over a pound of sugar and some yams that she was making. And these videos have kind of gone viral, and she keeps doing them, and it's become this running joke about the cooking at this place. And I kind of went a little locally viral because she has been making these seafood salads that have been sold at some of the grocery stores in Philadelphia. And I shared this image of a black cat that was just devouring that seafood salad. Because I couldn't eat it.
In their kitchen?
In the kitchen, no. It was outside the kitchen, but there was a black cat.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Good. That's a good one.
That scared me.
Well, a lot of things we go to that kitchen, but clearly. But there was I put this picture up of a black cat that was just eating the hell out of the seafood salad. I said, see, they're clearly stray cats and alley cats is enjoying it. Clearly it's not for people. Because I couldn't eat it. So I thought the cat could eat it. And the cat ate it. And the photo was just going all over. The cat got their life. It was just I said, someone loves it. It's just not me.
I don't know much about her. I think I saw the yams.
Yams, yes.
That's the only thing that
these videos, so these videos have gotten around. This has become a national thing. And so when I saw this situation with the lasagna, at first I thought that was his thing. I was like, is he one of these guys out here trying to go viral for making just bad food? And that was just his whole brand. But then I started to dive deep in this. I was like, wait a minute. This man really has a following. People actually think he can cook, I guess. And he's really trying to...
And he thinks he can cook.
And that's the first era, right? He really out here trying to brand himself. And so when I saw the lasagna video, I saw it and I was like, this is a joke. Not cauliflowers in... This is too much. What is this red wine? What is going on here? This is a catastrophe. But I thought this was a joke. And then when I realized it wasn't a joke and that he was actually throwing shots, at you and, doing all this. I said, wait, how did you get in this? I was like, why is he, what's going on? What? It was the,
what?
Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, what's interesting about that night in particular, like, because I went back after the fact, like that night, I mostly tweet from my mentions. So things got kind of crazy with that video going viral. Mm-hmm. But I went back just to I'm like, what am I missing? Because I wasn't really commenting. I wasn't participating in that actual thread. So I didn't realize how far it had gone. I made a couple comments that night on my page. And when I went back and looked at it, when I was looking through the receipts, that tweet had almost, I think it was 1 million views at the time that I last checked it. Like thousands of
those analytics don't play.
And responses. So why is it that he singled me out? Do you know what I mean? Like, that's one of the things that I thought about after the fact. Like, why is it that he singled me out that night out of the thousands of people that were making fun of his food? He made a point of making it a battle with me, because he started that on his live that weekend. He went on live, and that's when he was making fun of me about not being a millionaire, and all she does is cook with duck fat, and her counters are Formica. Like, it was just these random insults, and I don't even know where they were based on. Like, if you allegedly have not seen me in 7 years, then why are you even pretending to know what my kitchen looks like? Which he wasn't even close. It's just bizarre that he chose to go after me despite all of Twitter dragging him.
I think this is...
in hindsight, I understand more now. Like, I understand why. But back then, I think that was kind of lost on a lot of people, that he really did just zero in on me and make it this thing about me and him from the beginning, when he could have responded to any of the hundreds of people that were going in on him.
Right. And I think what happens is that this is this thing that I talk about a lot, and there's this power dynamic, right, of who he feels like has the clout, right? He knows that there could be any random person on the internet, but because you have a blue check, because you're verified, because you also are someone in that industry, right, that is respected, your opinion, right, carries weight to him more than some rando. Because when you tweet, you get retweets, right? Like, when you tweet something and you say something, people are looking. And it's not bots, it's not bot followers, it's not none of that. You have people that literally genuinely follow you that is going to spread the gospel. And so I think what he tried to do in that situation, from my perspective, is that he wanted to make it this tongue-in-cheek, she don't like me, or people don't like me kind of thing, to dismiss what real legitimate critique is being had. And I've dealt with that with people where, with famous people and people of influence, where they will do the whole, this person, he has some other stuff. This person ain't gonna ever say anything nice about me, even if it's legitimate, And so I felt like that singling out in that way was trying to make you look like a mean girl, basically. I think he was trying to make it look like hey, I'm just a man out here cooking and doing mean. I don't know why these people be coming for me. And then
right,
you kind of had to let everybody know you had to let everybody know why that this was deeper than what he was trying to dismiss it as. Because he was trying to play you like a hater. Yeah.
That's his typical deflection, and I saw right through it in that moment. But I also realized that I had an opportunity, because he did single me out, and he made it about me, and I felt free to to go in at that point. And that's when I started looking at it a little bit more, because I honestly had not kept up with his scams. Like, I knew about some rumors about him being a terrible business partner, and the things that have been reported on Lipstick Alley over the years. But really, just like Sunny, I was kind of surprised when that story came out about the restaurants closing and the credit consent judgment all at the same time, because that was the first time I had seen him pop up like that. And even then, it was just a week of kind of side-eyeing, why would you treat your restaurant staff like that? You know what I mean? Why are you doing credit repair? I wasn't even aware that business existed. But it just
it shouldn't be existing.
It died down. Right. He got away with it again, and because the people's interest is fickle, you
So I
know.
have a
And this
theory
time
on that.
around, I said, wait a second, this can't be the same guy that's like still going strong after all that happened. And then I looked at the food and I was shocked because I hadn't really, truly, I had not looked at his feed since 2014. It had just been, you know, if there was a video that happened to be viral that was outside of his account, I would see it. But he since has hired like a food stylist since 2014. Like a lot of his work, the editorial kind of content looks much more polished. And I just assumed that was him. And then when I started looking into it, I was like, oh shit, like he still can't cook.
Well, if you can't
like, how
cook,
is
but
this still happening 7 years later?
Exactly. I have a theory.
I got curious, like, what's really going on with this platform behind the scenes that somebody can rise to this size of an audience, which of course, everything from the beginning was what he projected. He has this huge audience, he has all the success, he has all these businesses. And as we would soon find out, a lot of that was a facade.
Oh yeah, I think so. There's a lot of there. You know, it's interesting because there's like a pattern, and I don't know if Atlanta is the mecca for black scammery, but like
I've heard that it is.
It is. I'm gonna say, you know, listen, I always tell, and some of my listeners, I always say there are the gays, and then there are the gays from Atlanta. But just in the community sense, right? There's the blacks and there's the blacks from Atlanta. Like there's a different. Atlanta is like a different type of cultural, whether it's for black gay people, whether it's just for black folks in general. Atlanta is just an interesting, like, you know, it's an interesting city. And I think a lot of the stories I do on scamming has its roots in Atlanta. Like, for example, Sean King hailed from Atlanta.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he went to Morehouse. Well, he's not from there originally, but he went to Morehouse, and then he started some of his first initial alleged grifting projects in Atlanta, because that's where he went to. He went to Morehouse, and then he was a minister. And people don't know this. He was a minister that was doing the, you know, collection.
He was an actual minister, not.
Well, one of those ordained ones,
That's
I suppose.
So funny
I think
because
he was.
Darius like lied about his.
Well, I think he was. I think he was trying to build a church.
Though?
There's receipts, and there was some reporting that was done at the Daily Beast many years ago that talked about his start. But I think he was in ministry, like trying to build this big church that never took off. But he was actually, I think that's what he started. And you know, a lot of these crooks start from the church. You know, some of the best ones, you know, they got to learn the art. You know, the way that he asks for money.
Yeah.
It's from that same vein. So
parallels.
I wish whenever that Sean King document, if there's ever going to be that real one, it's going to be one day, right? In the next couple of years, somebody got to do it, right? Maybe we'll see. But there's got to be the conversation about how the origins of what he did started. It started from that type of, you know, grassroots church organizing type of, you know, can you lend $1? Can you give a prayer? And that, I mean, if you think about the way the civil rights movement started with people in clergy, and then, you know, some people used that to grift and some people did the right thing. But there's an origin there, and it started in Atlanta for him. And to see Darius Cook in Atlanta, I mean, I was born in Chicago, I grew up in Houston, and I came to Philly. But to see him go to Atlanta, it just makes so much sense, because Atlanta, for his, you know, because now I sound like a historian of scammery, but, you know, Atlanta is a place that's all about appearance. It's all about the look of things. Whether or not people are doing things or not doing things, it's about the look. It's about status. And so everybody in Atlanta that isn't doing the work, let me put a disclaimer there. They are trying to align themselves with people that do, because it's all about an appearance. So there's a lot of people that's out here talking about how they're friends with 5,000 of these Real Housewives and Love and Hip Hop people, because they need to be connected to someone who does the work. And so every time I go to Atlanta, I've noticed there's always a ton of people that's going to name drop 5,000 people they know or work with in some kind of proximity, so that they can be able to build off of that. There's not too many people that in Atlanta that I know that can stand on their own name. It's always going to be, I worked for her, I was candy stylist, oh, I catered for so and so. So they're going to always name drop 1,000 people to build their own image, because a lot of people are out there throwing money, because a lot of people are out there doing some scammery. There's a lot of tax breaks and all kind of things happening. I mean, think about Tyler Perry. Tyler Perry got his stuff in Atlanta. I mean, think about a lot of the people who are just cutting corners. You can go to Atlanta, and it's almost like the city embraces these cutting corners, and so it's a cesspool of scammery, a mecca of opportunity, but then a hot pile of fraudulence and bullshit. And so I can see a guy like Darius coming in there with a little bit of money, some Southern charm or some charm, right? Because you got to have charm. If you don't have charm and you can't finesse, you can't make it in Atlanta. Everybody in Atlanta got finesse and charm if they want to survive. Those who don't have that can't survive in Atlanta. So I think he came there, crafted this narrative, right? He talks about the grandma cooking the recipe. Like, you got to have a story. And the story resonates, right? It's all these are my grandma's recipes. Clearly, that's a lie. We can confirm that's a lie.
That is where that really picked up. Around 2015 is when he put out that book. I call it Lies from His Grandmother's Kitchen.
Correct.
But that is when that story kind of really got wings. And he switched. His brand originally was everydaycooking.com. It was on Blogspot. And around that time is when he made that transition to calling himself Darius Cooks. And he kind of drilled down on that story,
And he also was in Atlanta,
from
right?
From the beginning, he moved to Atlanta. But, I mean, allegedly, he was run out of New York for some scams that he was doing up there. So it went from Chicago to New York to Atlanta, and now the question is, where does he run next?
Yeah, I mean, he can't come to Philadelphia, clearly. Philly don't play that. He
can't come to Detroit either.
You can't come to Philly with that. I mean, Philly's a very black and brown city, but Philly's a tough town to crack because it's a city that loves itself and love people from it. And if you are not from Philly, as someone who's not from Philly, I can say, you got to come here and you got to really embrace this town and do right by this town if you want to stay in this town. Now, I've been in this town for 11 years, and I've seen people come to Philly and go because they was trying to come here and act like, okay, you are here, but I'm going to do my thing. You don't do your thing in Philadelphia. You're with community. You're with people. And if you don't embrace the people, you can send your ass to New York, LA, or wherever, but you can't come down here. Atlanta, it's like mini colonizers. Everybody in Atlanta can do whatever they want to do and do whatever, as long as they got they little acre of land or whatever land they got, that they can do their own thing, and everybody just kind of coexists. But that's not how cities like Philadelphia is, and I can imagine it's not the same for Detroit either. Well,
it's kind of interesting that you say that, because I think the digital space is very much like that as well. I think with most food blogs, we all, people exist in their little bubble and they have their audience, and some of us don't even really have audiences that intersect too much. In the Black blogging community, I think we have a little bit more intersection than as the blog community at large. But you can pretty much get away with doing whatever you want within your little bubble. If you have an audience and the audience buys your shit and they, gather around your whatever the thing is that you're trying to promote, then you can get by. And that's fine if you're not hurting people, you're not bothering people.
Facts. But they often are.
Right. Like, where we had to speak up was because, hey, you are actually causing harm, and this isn't about, like, you just do what you do in your bubble and nobody else cares.
Right. And I would say too, that and this is an important aspect, and I'm taking a risk here by saying this in general, but I do think that the type of this is a deep. So I have, and it gets to me just thinking of the theory of all of these things he's done. I think that through, one of the things that a lot of grifters do and folks like that do, is that they like to do this thing where they create a bunch of different businesses because they want to have a different level of audiences, but a different level of supporters based on that audience. And so what I mean by that is, like, when I think of like a Sean King and I think of folks like that, he created different projects that spoke to different types of people. And there are different things that people look at in that following. And so he's not like the typical organizer or activist on the ground because he has different appeals to different people for different reasons. And so how they support and defend him is very different compared to his other organizers or activists that, I mean, he's not really an organizer, but that's what he calls himself, right? That is different from everyone else. So for example, I think with Darius Cooks, why I like studied him and been studying what makes him different in this situation is that because he created all these different types of businesses, he didn't frame himself as a cook. He framed himself as a millionaire. We know that those coins, those receipts don't match, but he framed himself as an entrepreneur, as a self, pick yourself up by the bootstraps entrepreneur. And he did it in a place like Atlanta where that's what people want, status, money. And then he kind of got some traction outside of Atlanta as being this black man, which there comes that level, right? That gender privilege, right? He's a black man that self-made money, that is grandma, right? Grandma's recipes. So outside of that, he's an entrepreneur. And so what happens is that the type of people that follow Darius Cooks, I would argue, are people who are not really into food. I would argue these are not the people from the food community per se. There's some people that like to dibble and dabble in cooking and eating. There might be a couple of folks, but I highly doubt that the followers that you have, that Sunny have, that Food Network community, that black food blogging sphere, this is not those people. These people are folks that are following him on an entrepreneurship tip rather than an actual interest in food and creativity tip. And so they're looking at him as, how can I get rich like him? And the businesses and the stuff that he do is not just focused on food, but it's shifted to building credit, building wealth. And listen, there is a whole cult, and I know you know this, of these black men who are very much like, get rich like me. There's a guy in Philadelphia that went to Atlanta named Nehemiah Davis that has been accused of ripping people off and scamming people, allegedly. And he was big on these books. So the stuff that Darius is doing, I'm like, these are the same. He learned this from somewhere. He didn't learn this from the cooking world, right? Because he won't listen to anybody, right? People like Sonny, who could have been a mentor to him, other folks that could have called him in before he got called out, they didn't do that. So what happened was that he got with all of these types of self-millionaire types, these self-entrepreneur type dudes, and he studied them because they're fascinating in a corrupt way, right? These guys,
yeah, morbidly fascinating.
Exactly. And he basically, I think, saw these people on social media, followed their tricks, and branded his businesses like that until Georgia came clapping down on that ass. But then he said, how do I take this model and apply it to this cooking model? So he doesn't cook or do his content like what I would consider the traditional cook, because everything he do is geared towards making money. It's geared towards, numbers. The way he even talks about his success, the way that he did that video talking about how you make money off your name, his passion isn't in the food he makes because it's horrible. His passion is in the entrepreneurship, and his followers are captivated by his hustle than they're captivated by his food and his craft. And so that's a different audience, because those people, because when I look at the critiques, they're saying he's laughing his way to the bank. He ain't worried about the haters. He making the money pile up, allegedly. He's doing all of these things. They're not speaking about the quality of his content. They're speaking about the hustle itself, which is really to us the grift. And so they call it hustle. We call it grift. We call it scam. They call it inspirational. Because in our community, we as Black people, we're allured by this idea of generational wealth. We're allured by things that we can't afford or we can't have instantly. We're caught up with overnight celebrity and success. We're still drunken by the American dream. And this man has tapped into that zeitgeist of knowing how to appeal to these people in a way where they're following him, not because his food is good, his recipes are legit, his cookbook ain't shit. They're following him because they think that this is a legitimate way to achieve wealth and prosperity, and they're inspired by it because they think that they can take the elements of his fuckery and turn their shit into gold. And that's what is driving this audience. These people don't care about the food. They don't know how to cook. Hell, they're not even using them cookbooks, but they're just looking at him, and what he's figured out to do is it's a costume for him. It's a performance for him. The whole idea of being a cook, a chef, he knows he ain't no fucking cook. It's a joke. He has no respect for the craft. The motherfucker is using metal tongues for steaks. It's a joke. It's a mockery. And the thing that I think that's so interesting about his followers is that they clearly don't know because they don't do this work, right? They don't know what it is. They don't know any of this. They're not here for the food. They're here for the hustle, the grind. They don't have a respect for the craft of culinary, food and originating the invention. They're just caught up in the allure of this man is making money. And when you listen to the videos and the things he say, he's always giving this financial advice. He's always giving this incentive in a way has nothing to do with food. He can talk more about making money than he can talk about food. And that's what's keeping the audience in. I think he's lost, in my opinion, a lot of avid foodies. If you are a real foodie in this black food scene, in this American food scene, you are not at all listening to Darius Crooks. You're not listening to Darius Williams. You're not following him. You're not. So the question becomes, who is this following? And this following is, like I said, I think those followers who followed him on that tax advising journey, that entrepreneurial journey, that network he built in Atlanta that continues to keep him relevant because he's making sure that they get their kickbacks, whether it's a shout out to their brands, whether it's those little faulty collaborations he tried to do. He's mindful that in his pursuit, I assume and predict, allegedly, that he is fucking over the food people because he don't care about them. But he's making sure he stays somewhat in the good graces of these scammers and money entrepreneurs and all this crap that they're doing. And that's what's still keeping him. He is touchable, but untouchable among some of these crazy cult followers.
Yeah, I think that he has that core audience. I think most of them are on Facebook. That kind of they're kind of there for the food because they're in the same place with the kind of food that they eat. I mean, the people that are spending $200 to eat slop, seven courses of slop, those are not real food people.
But
whatever reason they find value in the food, like it is what it is. But like it's kind of a separate issue.
Right, but I wonder if it's just, in a sense, an appeal to connect with him because they think he can do something for them. Because when I did some of my background, when I did my background on some of the people that bought tickets for him, some of those people told me that they didn't really care for the food, or that was never, they weren't, the food was like indifferent to them, but they just wanted that chance to like get this networking. They thought there could be something else to be connected with them. They wanted something else out of him that they thought they could get.
It's a very weird, it's a strange kind of relationship to observe, like the way that they interact on lives, just from an outside looking in. I kind of cringe, just like the late night lives where he doesn't have a shirt on.
Oh, yes.
You see the comments and it's like, it kind of taps into his, the last couple of interviews where he kind of interjected, his identity into the conversation where there wasn't a reason, for it. And it just makes me wonder how much he plays off of women's attraction to him, whether, as misplaced as that is. It's a very inappropriate kind of vibe that, you know what I mean? Where they're it's like they're looking at him like their boyfriend on the internet. It's odd.
Well, I think what it is, and I'll say this as a black queer man, is that there is a subculture in our community where there is that pick-me culture of black gay men who aspire to the acceptance, the embrace, the conglomerate of straight people in a way that they are normalized in this way. And some of the things he has said to the press, I have just been like, yeah, this dude takes himself too seriously, right? He's like, they can't tell that I'm gay. I'm sorry. What? I could say.
Right.
I mean,
right.
For me, I wasn't confused. I mean, the jargon and the language he would say, it was cultural jargon we use in the community. So I was like, I don't know who was not thinking that. I mean, granted, he was like, they wouldn't know. I mean, gender performance roles, I think he's one of those guys. I would assume that really plays up the whole, straight people like me, gay people want me. He plays into this dynamic where he really cares about that because he knows his audience, right? He knows a lot of people, unfortunately, supporting him are Black women, probably a little bit older, right? That are generated to him, liking his story. And so he's playing up a lot of aspects of his sexuality, his identity, or the ambiguity of what he thinks his gender performance is, child. But he's playing up that to appeal to those people. And so when I heard some of the stuff he was saying, I was confused. Like he says, oh, well, they just don't know I'm gay. I'm like, but that doesn't justify your disrespect to Black women. I don't know.
Right.
This always
had
happens
nothing to do with it.
Where there's this logic of, well, they all do this where it's like, oh, well, I can't be anti-Black woman. I'm gay. That has nothing, your sexual orientation does not have anything to do with how you treat other people, regardless of gender. You can be racist if you're a white gay man, you can be racist. If you are a Black gay man, you can be sexist. You can be colorist. You can be all of those things that isn't related to your sexual orientation. Like the same way Black men can be sexist to they can be misogynistic and embrace misogynoir to Black women, regardless of the fact that they're still Black, because we know that sexism is still can be there. I think he clearly has a bad understanding of how all of this works. And I think he has used a lot of ignorance to his audience, who a lot of them clearly are not self-aware about these type of topics and issues. When you have a low education following that are basically people who just want to hear what they want to hear and blindly support someone, it's a cult-like mentality. And he's leaning into that for all the wrong reasons. And the thing is that these types of things do crash. They do. Like, they get hot, but eventually it gets played out. Like, it do. I've seen so many of these types of folks come in, and they come in hot, and then the wheels eventually fall off because either somebody else picks up where they left off and do it too, or, whatever. I mean, I look at, like, this is going to be I look at, like, D-Ray, allegedly. D-Ray, was hot, right? Remember Mr. Blue Bubble Vest? Everybody knew him. Everybody liked the bubble blue vest. Everybody was, acting like he was the best thing since sliced bread. But he kept doing a lot of things. And none of it wasn't necessarily scammery, but just thirst. Like, he ran for mayor. He got involved with all these corporate sponsorships. It just got really weird, and people just started to question his entire framing. Is he canceled? I don't think that's the appropriate title. But he got faded out. And then Tamika Mallory stepped up, and now the grift continues. But, like, that's the thing. I think that, a new person emerges in a way that appeals to that audience. And I think that, D-Ray still has popularity. People still like him. But, he had a book that came out that didn't really pop off. He tried to do all the other things that just never really took off because he just got overexposed. He was in everything, and a lot of it had nothing to do with what he was supposed to be doing. And a lot of people just got over it. And I think that with Darius Crooks, I think that where he is at now is that he's coming from this place of he's hot because of the controversy, but not hot in the sense that when these things begin, these lawsuits begin to pick up, when they catch steam, when people start to really gain traction and hit him where it hurts, that support will not be there. And we're seeing, I think, and I'm knocking on my wooden table right here, but I think we're seeing that with Sean King, even though it took forever. But we're seeing that now. We're starting to see the beginning of the end. We're not there. We're not at the end, I don't think. But I'm seeing that we're at the beginning of the end, where we're starting to see that the rise of defense is starting to really subdue. I think that's what's happening with him, where he can't keep on responding. When you get to a point where you're consistently having to respond to controversy after controversy, people start being like, okay, this is too much. You just I was rocking with you, but this is too much. And I think with Sean King, he's generating more bad press than good press. There was a time where he could counter something, right? When a group of us came at him and was criticizing him for the North Star, which is now dead. Hallelujah. When that collapsed, it was fading, but he got to go to the Rihanna Diamond Ball, and she honored him, and that broke my heart. I love Rihanna, but when Rihanna did that, that broke my heart. But when she did that, and he was in that room, and Cardi B and all them was there, that was a way to rebounce and distract. Darius Crooks don't have that. Like, is there anyone from Food Network taking them calls? No. Who is calling him and giving him? I mean, Southern Grit ain't fucking with him.
But that's part of. I think that's part of the delusion is him not understanding that nobody gives a fuck about him in the industry. Like, nobody is going to write articles praising him.
Nobody came to see you, Otis.
He's not going to get a brand partnership after this. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, he doesn't. I'm not sure what part of that is not clicking for him, but he will have no choice but to exist within his own bubble at this point, because we all see him for what he is, and the people that know better are not going to give him those opportunities now that they know who he is.
Well, yeah, because at this point, I mean, the Kev on stage situation is a textbook example of anytime anybody with any ounce of relevance, hype, blue check, whatever, co-signs anything that he do, they're going to get a storm of people saying why. I mean, the baby, I worked on that campaign, okay? We was out there on them Twitter streets looking at Lollapalooza like, what's good? Governor's Ball, what's good? And people thought, y'all crazy, ain't nothing stopping him. Bet. And what we saw a week later is everybody pulled out because they can't take the attention. When what you do impact what I do, that becomes the problem, right? Like it don't make any of them money or benefit them to collaborate right now. It's a liability and an asset at this point. Kev thought once upon a time having this non-verified millionaire allegedly come on his show and talk, there was this value there, right? Because that's what I said. That's what I mean by he generate this following on something that had nothing to do with food. So that following, that cult following, that entrepreneur, I want to be rich cult is real. When I was going and criticizing this guy named, Nehemiah Davis, I remember all of these people that had paid money for him for services or influence or bought into his books. They fought hard against me. And I kept saying to myself, why are they so hard? Like, listen, I'm telling my truth. I'm telling these receipts. They were so hard against me. And I think the reason why is because nobody, especially black people, right, our pride, we don't want to feel like we got suckered. We would rather believe that it's all a lie than believe that we was dumb enough to fall for it. But we're humans. We all fall for the okie doke in some facet of our lives, whether it's a lover, whether it's money, whether it's a project, whether it's a business deal, whatever the case is, we all fall for the okie doke at some point of our lives. And I think people just don't want to feel that way because some people may have invested some money into something he did, or they may have invested time and energy watching his trash ass videos, and they're now realizing, oh my God, all this was a sham. People don't like to feel that. So they would like to resist and challenge because they would rather fuck with people like you and I who have receipts than have to look in the mirror and deal with the fact that they too was duped. So they would gaslight. And I think the thing about them and that people like that, the ones who keep asking all the fucking questions after you done already provided a billion answers, those people are the ones that's grappling with the reality that they were duped. And what I have done in the past to respond to people like that, and I'm just, I see some of these people come in the comments and stuff that you post, Sonny posts on others. I say, I understand, and I don't even try to be condescending, but it might be. But I say something like, I understand that this must be hard for you to hear. You may have invested a lot of your time and energy believing the bullshit. And so I understand that all of this is hitting you. But I want to let you know I'm not the enemy. That's what I used to just copy paste. I was sending some people that would email me, come at me a certain way. I would just say, I'm not the enemy. I'm putting this information here. This might be hard for you to receive. Because let's be real, some of these people, they fell for it. Our people fell for it. Like, I love our people. I love our community. Sometimes, to be, you as a black woman, me as a black woman, like, you live in a community that they say you give them life, but they actively work to fuck you up. It's a hard thing. I was talking about this with the baby the other day. It was just like, it's hard fighting for men, fighting for a community that have people like the baby, right? Like, I don't want the police state to kill him. I don't want any of these things to happen. And when I say Black Lives Matter, I'm thinking of people like him, thinking of women like you, people like Darius Crooks. But at the same time, knowing that some of these people, right, like the baby, like Darius Crooks, is doing things that actively demise and go against my very existence, creativity, and integrity. And that's hard to navigate, that line of empathy and compassion, but at the same time recognizing, look, two things can be true at the same time. Your life matters as a black person, Black Lives Matter, but at the same time, you fucked up, you need to go away. You need to sit down. You need to get up out of here. And we can hold gum and we can chew gum and walk at the same time. And I think sometimes people forget that you can be able to say, and I love this that you've been saying, this is something I've been saying in different spaces, is the word deplatform. Nobody is saying that Darius Crooks needs to go to, nobody is saying that no one is saying that Darius Crooks need to die, right? Nobody is saying this man's life does not matter. What is being said is that this man needs to back the fuck up out of these spaces where he is creating harm. And I think that that's the reality, is that, do I want the baby to die? No. Does his life matter? All lives matter. But does this mean to me that he should not, because of the fact that he's black, that means he's above reproach, that he shouldn't be made to sit down, that he shouldn't be held accountable? Absolutely not. And I think too many people conflate racial identity politics in general, to try to dismiss people from accountability or gaslight people, holding them accountable. And so I feel like where we're at, and I think the term deplatform is, I just feel like at the end of the day, success to me and victory looks like Darius Crooks not having the platform to target black women. Throwing shots, doing discount codes with people's names on it, stealing people's recipes and ideas and intellectual property. A world to me in victory in this looks like him not having the ability to facade as a chef, to fake this, to mock this craft of artistry, to insult and troll people. I don't think he should have that platform to do that. I don't think he should have all of those followers that continue to drink his Kool-Aid and then gaslight and cause harm to the very people that he's also causing harm to. I don't think he deserves to have the platform to do all of those things. And so that is where I stand on it. And I tell people that when we talk about deplatform, it means you don't get all of these tools that you've decided to weaponize to create harm. Like, if Darius Crooks was making his nasty food and minding his nasty business,
nobody would care.
Nobody would care. Like, I tell you, with country cooking, Sadia Shula is out here making mac and cheese with 12 dozen eggs. Ain't nobody trying to cancel her. Ain't nobody trying to deplatform Sadia. Somebody can make her nasty food and do her thing. Her fans love it. They love it. That's cool. There's a lot of bad cooks out here in these streets, okay? This is nothing new.
Right.
There's a lot of people out here in these
posted
streets
about
that can't cook.
It's not. It's like there's a point where bad cooking crosses over into the line of misinformation. And as a cook, and as a professional in this industry, that concerns me. So, and that's why I post about it. It's like you have to lead with the jokes because that's what gets people's attention. Unfortunately, on social media,
agreed.
It travels further and faster. So that's why I made the PSA about the salt. Like that was ridiculous to put that much salt in a couple pounds of catfish. And I was watching it, and all I could think about
I had
was
heartburn looking at it.
It was crazy. My father had a heart attack a few years ago, and I remember how hard that first couple of years was, figuring out what he could eat and how to limit the sodium that we were using to cook with. And it was just, you become so sensitive to it at that point. And there's so many of the people in our community and our families that are dealing with high blood pressure, with heart disease, diabetes, like all of these things. And the food that we're cooking, it matters. I struggle with my health, with my weight, like all of these things. I'm not speaking on it hypocritically. This is a concern to me as well. And I think we all have to do better. So when you have a platform and you have millions of people looking at your food and you are presenting yourself as a teacher, then you should be teaching information that we can all agree it's helpful. And going so far beyond the recommended sodium, allowance for the day, it's just like, this is not something that you can overlook. This is not like a matter of opinion or like he added a couple pinches extra. No, he put almost a week's worth of sodium into one dish. It's inexcusable, and it can literally kill somebody.
And the fact that, he's getting, again, that wide platform to project these types of unchecked and unhinged health concerns in our food and our eating is furthering that culture that we're trying to do as cooks, as foodies, as journalists, right? Trying to change that. And he's going against that. I mean, what he do, his whole brand goes against that. I mean, I just feel like even outside of food aside, right? For 5 seconds, because I love food. But like, just looking at his whole business model of how he is making his quote unquote money and how he is targeting members in the community in this type of way. Like, on a business tip, it's just disrespectful. Like the discount codes, the videos of the beef and the making of money, like all of this gross capitalism, all of this, like I saw the video of him, talking about your mental health and talking about all these, like this is fucked up. Like this is really, like my thing is when you get to a point where you don't have receipts and you start doing ad hominem attacks, and I think that what I do appreciate and I do think that is interesting, even with Sean King, is that, the community gets receipts. What you're saying stands on its own merits without you having to make just a whole entire personal shots, because there would be no traction. Journalists wouldn't be able to publish it because, we'd be like, okay, so she's just saying he ain't shit. Okay, how many tweets are we going to say of her saying Darius Crooks ain't shit? Show me he's not shit. Oh, right. Okay, these testimonies, these employees stepping forward, these GoFundMes, these receipts, these complaints, these emails, all of this is showing me what kind of person he is. Where is that on Angela? We just gonna keep shooting and calling people delusional. We're just gonna keep talking about people in this very personal, low-level way without saying, okay, if I'm gonna say you ain't got your shit together, I can say that because I'm about to show you 1,000 different ways you don't got your shit together. Just
which is what we're doing for him, and
right.
For people to keep asking, well, why does it matter? Why does it matter? Like all these things he did in his past, because it speaks to his character. It speaks to the fact that this is a person pretending to be a millionaire, charging $800 for courses on how to be a millionaire. And this is a person whose entire existence was filled with bankruptcy and eviction and illegal credit repair it's just like, this is insane. Like, this man has no financial background. He has no degrees in business. He has lied about where he went to college in multiple places, multiple interviews throughout his career. He has lied about his background. Why are we trusting this person with social security numbers and personal identifying information and credit cards over the internet? Like, how does this food blogger rebrand as a business coach, and nobody questions his credentials?
Yeah, and no one, and I think the issue too is that, like I said, I think a lot of this has become team this versus team that, and people have lost sight. I saw that his ex-boyfriend has been very vocal. Yeah, and he has been, he's listened to my podcast, he follows me on Twitter, and, it made me think about the role of journalism in this. Because this could have been addressed maybe 2 years ago. When you said earlier about the restaurant closings last year, I think a lot of things played up the narrative, right? One was that the pandemic happened and everybody was worried about their own lives to worry about his ass. The racial uprisings, I think, made a shift towards us in this support Black-owned businesses movement, and a lot of people just kind of fell into that trap, and he capitalized off of it. A lot of people did, for better, for worse. And I think that gave him immunity in the social conscious of, like, people forgot, because he was able to also create this narrative because of the fact that I've heard from people, sources I spoke to for background for my story, that thought that was all connected to the pandemic because of how close it was. And then when I'd be like, no, actually December was when he got served all this. That shit happened in February, was a byproduct or consequence of that and other things. It was so much ambiguity around the closings happening in February that people thought it was a pandemic thing, even though the timeline was off. But people didn't, people are not as invested in the truth in that way. So he played into that ambiguity around that helped him reshift and rebrand himself yet again. But one of the things that...
And the mental health.
Yes.
He threw in that mental health
yes, he did.
Crisis. That's what it was.
And it's funny because he's mocking yours. He's talking about you.
Right.
He's talking. See, that's how I knew it was some fuckery, because I was like, wait a minute. You were literally on this video
with
shooting
his
shots.
bottles.
But you literally failed epically. You had to shut down not one, not two, but 3 restaurants.
3 restaurants.
And you're over here talking about it was mental health. I can only imagine, if we're going to entertain this for 5 seconds, that this would have had a major impact on your self-care and your awareness in these things. So how do you, as somebody who has been afflicted by these types of emotional hurdles and struggles, can shit on somebody else's mental health? Interesting.
It's very interesting. It's also interesting, even just looking into what he said at that time about the industry being a trigger, and as another chef pointed out, how do you get from there to booking out 2 years of a nationwide dining tour? Like, where is that disconnect to where you bounce back like that and you just continue on to the next grift? Like, I really wish people would have held him accountable, and I don't know the right way to do that. I think it's a touchy subject. Everybody is entitled to. Everybody has their issues,
Right.
But you can't interject like your mental health into this story as this reason why all of these things are failing, and then when the tables are turned, you weaponize mental health against somebody else to say that what they're saying is unhinged, it's untrue, she needs therapy, she needs meds. Like, I'm not clear on what part of that he isn't seeing, like the hypocrisy here.
No, absolutely. And I think a lot of it is because there's never been this microscope on him in a way that's put him in a position to have to confront that, right? I mean, a lot of this is a situation where people say shit and just keep moving. And
he's never questioned. Like, it's disturbing, actually, when I looked at it, like just going through his old interviews, it's disturbing because there are some situations where, like, there was one in particular, there was a chef that was interviewing him at Peaches, and this guy seemed to be a legitimate professional. Like, he knew what he was talking about. And as the interview continues, it's just, there's so many points where I wonder if there's just like a pause, and I wonder if like he wanted to press him on his answers, because Darius gives these very vague responses.
I mean,
you know, about like his family history, about food, about soul food. It's just very vague. It's very, and if you press him, I doubt that he would be able to back up his statements with more details. You know, like there was a point where the chef was asking him about how he got into food and, you know, what he started doing. And he always tells this kind of vague explanation about just being around when his grandmother and mother were cooking. And then the person interviewing him gave a very detailed story about his experiences growing up in the kitchen with, like, you know, an actual like story and recipe attached to it. And it was just such a difference when I saw it back to back.
Right.
And that's what made me really start to just kind of pay attention to, like, there's not a whole lot underneath that blanket statement that he always makes that, you know, I grew up watching my grandmother cook. Well, like, what are those real stories then? Because he only has like 2 or 3 that just circulate, and nobody questions that. Nobody questions what he means when he just spits out random words about freedom and independence and soul, and you know what I mean? He just spits out words, and they don't actually mean anything, but I guess he thinks it sounds important.
Yeah, I think exactly. And I think part of this issue too is that I get the sense that he is in this place of, you know, this isn't where his heart is at. The food stuff is like the lure, but really the core of what he wants is a man who wants money. He's a man that, I mean, I think the compelling, interesting thing about him is men like him, guys who do these types of things, you gotta wonder, like, deep down inside, the real story is an internal struggle around money and this need to not be. Like, I wonder, did he come from a broken home? Did he come from because you don't see much of his family or anybody talked about it. And I know his partner talks about that. He has shared about it.
Yeah. He has shared about that. And there's things from his words, like he's posted it himself on Lipstick Alley about what happened with his mother and her bringing in another man into the house, and there were some issues there. He talks about being broke, which is another thing. Like, when we talk about the hypocrisy, he talked about being poor. He talked about his grandmother not being able to afford things. He has a history of being evicted from damn near every apartment he had in the 2000s. How then do we get to a place in 2021 where you're shaming other people for being renters, for not having a mortgage, for not being millionaires? He projects his ideals onto other people. He's had an obsession with being a millionaire since 2009, 2010. He started this blog called millionby30.com. And you can still pull it up on the archives. He had a whole blog about his quest to become a millionaire, and he was dead set on that number. And he never lost that. Like, it really has always been at the heart, just like you're saying. He said himself in his millionaire course that success is not passion or purpose.
Right.
It's about what you're good at. And for him, it's about creating a sales funnel.
It's the finesse. And that's what I'm saying. His identity is very clear. Like I said, from very beginning, I didn't know every single detail in that facet, but I figured that a lot of this is driven around money, wealth, whatever that looks like to him. But like, it's driven around making money. And I think that the whole vision was that. Because it looks like this is a man who started off with multiple other side hustles and get rich quick schemes that either failed or didn't work out, but he's determined to get that thing. And if it wasn't, cooking just seemed to track more for him. He's tried to do other things on the side, right? That just quickly got shut out. But the cooking thing seems to be what is hit for him, and he's ran with it. and he's established his identity around it. But the identity isn't the food anymore, or even the chef stuff. It's really the money aspect. He needs to make money. He
Yeah,
wants to hit
it's
this
just it's a
benchmark.
front.
He wants this identity, and it's so deep, and it's sad actually. If you kind of feel bad for the guy, because you know how
I
this is
don't.
going to end. I mean, feel bad for the
I don't,
circumstance.
to be honest.
Yeah, no,
I don't, because
yeah.
I just, the more I went back and looked, like, this was so intentional from the beginning. Like, this attempt to just take from the people that are supporting you, and never, never pay them back, never give back. Like, it's been from the very beginning. His very first businesses
it's giving sociopath.
were scams.
It's giving sociopath imagery.
It's crazy. I mean, it's just, I've never seen anything like this.
Oh, I have.
Well, okay.
Sean
I'm
King.
going to take that back, because if we had not been through Sean King, if we had not been through Trump, I would not have been prepared, I think, for going through the depths of this, of the fuckery and the deception. But I mean, like, more in the sense of like a food blogger. I've never seen anything like
this. Is wild.
Yeah.
This is wild.
Yeah.
I have not.
For it to have gone on for this long, for it to have been this deep, and I was just blown away by like his boldness to blog about his scams. He blogged about his illegal investment schemes. It's insane, really. And to think that you could just delete a blog and nobody ever was going to ever think about it again.
Yeah, yeah. So this is some mastermind type shit. I mean, he's smarter than I thought. I
don't know that it's necessarily smart. I think he's lucky. I think he's smart enough to come up with all of these ideas, right? But I think sometimes he even maybe legitimately thinks that he has the skill set to carry out some of these business plans, and maybe that's where the restaurants went wrong.
The hubris, right? Because when you get away with one thing, you think you can do something else that is not in your league. Like, I have
kind of like Trump.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's like
yeah, the White House was this big island.
Right. That politics was just like, it was a joke to him, right? From the beginning. It was just another way to have an audience. It's another way to feed like that narcissistic drive. And when he got elevated to the point of becoming president, he didn't really want that job. No. He didn't think he was going to win. No. He didn't think that it was real work, or that he was actually going to have to do it, and that there were real consequences that you can't just, like talk your way out of or tweet your way out of. And I look at the restaurants now as his Trump presidency, where he just got to this point of his platform, allowing him some of these opportunities, despite, his financial background, his lack of real credit at the time. Like, who knows where the money came from. But he got into the situation where he had real employees, he had real laws that had to be followed, real business licenses, real inspections, records that you can't erase. And he probably got overwhelmed. Restaurants are not easy.
Fire Festival.
Right. Yeah. Nobody it's hard to open one restaurant and be profitable. Who in their right mind opens 3 with no restaurant experience and really believe that these were just going to take off, that you could just go off for vacation every few months and the restaurants were just going to like open themselves? Like now that we're hearing all of these stories come out about the way his employees felt that they were treated, the conditions of the kitchen, it's just like, it's atrocious. And it really shed light on the fact that he had no idea how to run these businesses. And so they were going to fail regardless of him, when he decided to shut them down. Those restaurants were not going to survive. And it just makes me wonder if it became too big for him. And now he's going back to sticking to like these low level grifts where we're going to sell knockoff appliances because that's easy, because you can buy a shipment from China and put a website up and sell these appliances. And then there's no warranty, there's no return policy. Like, by the time people want their money back or figure out that the pans don't work, he'll have been moved on to the next business.
Right. And I think that's the same thing that's been interesting, has just been following this pattern of damn, that's a lot. Shit. I'm like, wow, how do we,
it's a lot.
It's a lot. Like, I'm just like, fuck.
And while all of this is going on, he's still actively running an illegal credit repair business. Like, people forget that is actually I think this is the biggest issue, is the fact that what he's doing is illegal. And I have no problem saying that, because the federal law is very clear.
It's illegal. You cannot do it.
Charge people up front for credit repair. You have to give 6 months to prove that you fixed their credit. You cannot have a payment plan. You cannot take a deposit up front. That's federal law. I don't know what happened with him in Georgia to where they zeroed in on, because the consent judgment spells out that same law and a few other things. I'm not sure how it went from that being the judgment coming out in Georgia, and it didn't flag the attention, beyond Georgia, but that is a federal law. So by him, even if he didn't continue to serve as Georgia residents, which, the truth will come out about that too, federally, what he's doing is illegal. Like what he's doing to guarantee, people a score above a certain number is illegal.
Right.
A lot of the things he's doing are illegal. And I don't have to be a lawyer. You can read the law and look at his website and compare the two and see that what he's doing is illegal. And I think that we really, really should be talking about, just as a community, like, why are we still falling for these kind of things? Like the credit repair, it's just like, he might as well be offering payday loans. I don't, it's just like, is that next?
I mean, Sean King has tried all types of weird shit over the years. And I think, to your point, we have seen this culture of people who have just, what we're realizing is that financial literacy is still one of the biggest hurdles in our community. Financial illiteracy is, I would say. And we're seeing that's how people like him can do what he do. And do it in a city like Atlanta, because, again, everybody out here doing all kind of shit, they got to find their hustle. It just also shows me the fact that he hasn't let go of those type of companies shows me that his restaurant and culinary business clearly isn't doing as well as he wants people to believe.
Exactly.
Why would you be holding on that shit? After getting slapped on the wrist by Georgia with that fine, I would have killed that business. I would have just said, let me focus on my food and my books, since they are hits and they sticking like grits. Let me focus on these books and this other stuff, since it's booming and I'm making all this money and I'm making this in 4 days. The same cost of your fines, if you getting 6-figure fines by Georgia, that should be a moment for you to say, you know what, fuck that. Let me get out of that business, because clearly that shit is getting me in trouble. You should be focused on everything else. So the fact that you are still dependent on these types of faulty services lets me know that everything ain't sunny over there with those other culinary endeavors.
But he needs it. And it just, the question is, how much is he really bringing in from that revenue stream? When he in the interview back a couple years ago, the local Atlanta news, there was a part where they asked him why he wasn't aware of the legalities, of credit repair. And he just had this very cavalier response, like, we didn't know it was illegal. Like, I mean, who knew? How are you're the self-professed millionaire running 7-figure businesses, and you haven't taken 5 minutes to Google the laws, in the state where you're about to operate? Like, it wasn't even a believable response. So this is something that he is clearly dead set on doing, and was dead set on continuing even after that judgment. And I think people should ask why. I think people should ask questions like, why has this man gravitated towards payroll jobs? Why did he create a fake payroll company? It's on his resume.
Yes.
It's like, we need to ask those kind of questions. And I think, like, when they say follow the money, these are the kind of questions people need to be asking about what's really going on.
Yes. And so one question, and this is, looking into the following of what's happened thus far. You've talked about in some tweets about the media specifically journalism publications, where you've reached out and tried to get a story or get things to talk about, and the hurdles and the things you've seen behind the scenes and things. I mean, I've written, of course, my piece for the Daily Beast that really kept the fire on this conversation, and it was great to see so many people gravitate towards and talk about it. And Southern Grit has done another story. Forbes have done a story on you. Black Enterprise did a story. But, some of these other places have been quiet. I think the Griot did something finally. But what has that experience of telling this story, pitching the story, getting awareness or whatever, what has that been like?
I mean, in the beginning, it was frustrating. It was like yelling into the void, and I was not prepared for how hard it would be to get somebody to pay attention. Deb from Southern Grit is the first person that reached out. Of course, a Black woman, just taking things in her own hands.
Right.
And she wanted to write a piece. And I was like, as much time as you need from me, I will walk you through everything I found so that you can figure out, what's the best angle to go with. And that's how that first article came about. And and then it was the Griot and who she, Biba later did follow up, and she did a real interview with Sunny and I. The first article was just more of like a recap of previously reported information. The Black Enterprise, that was a crazy experience because I had my interview the night before Darius put out those. Actually, it might have been the same day when he had that crazy video with the same woman that him and the woman that were talking about my mental health, where they were claiming to have talked to Black Enterprise and demanded a new journalist. And, it was just like this weird conversation about with this call that she allegedly made. Well, I had a real interview that day with like the actual journalist, and I knew that she was the legit journalist, that she was asking questions, and she knew he was lying about some of those questions. And so it was kind of crazy to see that play out in real time, where he's doing this live and talking about Black Enterprise is about to retract and apologize, and my statements are clarified. And I knew that he was just lying, like straight up lying. And we had all of the receipts about this business, Freshco in particular, that absolutely is his business. And it was crazy to see. Like, he actually had an opportunity to even he had his interview, I had my interview, and then he had a follow-up the next day, and he still lied about it.
And so for clarity, for clarity though, for the listeners, I don't want this to get caught up. There was never a retraction, there was never a correction, there was never none of that on your end. Okay.
No. Good. No. None of that. It was, I have no, even Kia, she had no idea like where their information came from. But it was in those moments that I realized this needs real journalism. This needs people that can read through that bullshit. And I stopped expecting the gossip bloggers and those columns to pick it up. And it actually, I think it would have hurt, like looking back. I was kind of surprised when even like Boss Up didn't come up with a crazy headline, because you know how messy they are. It doesn't take much. So when there was just like this, like there's like this deliberate silence from like the Boss Up and the shade rooms of the world. I said, okay, like he probably has friends there. Like they're not gonna bite. And then when the real stories came out, and I realized that he was really actively still going to lie to real journalists and kind of like create this false narrative, I think it's best left in the hands of journalists that can actually handle that.
Facts.
This doesn't need to sit in the gossip blogs. Like,
that's right.
It's so much more serious than that now. And I think things happening like the way that they should, and there's people that are really taking the time to like investigate.
100%. I think, what I have seen recently is that there has been a new interest in journalists, and really talk to Black journalists, people, if you can. If you got a publication, right. Because we are also in these Twitter streets too. We kind of do see something. We don't always see everything, but we do see, we do get some sense of what's going on. Like if you say Darius Crooks to some folks in mainstream journalism that's in these streets, They know about him. Either their friend has retweeted about it or they didn't heard about their own. But we know. And one of the things that has been frustrating about issues like this is that these types of things can easily become a farce, meaning that some place like a Bossip or a Lipstick Alley, people say, you can't believe this hot mess, but the receipts are, and they treat it like it's silly. And when I took it to the Daily Beast, I was like, look, we do stories about scammers, grifters, and people like this every day. This guy is that in this particular space. And I want to cover this with the right level, the same level of maturity and integrity that we would do for any of these other folks. Because too often,
Absolutely.
you know, when it's a black story, it's a, did you see this? LOL. Can you believe this hot mess? Ooh, the drama. They treat this like the impacts are not as consequential or detrimental as if a white man did it. And so I am very clear that when I cover these stories in the community, I take them from the blogs. We always say in the business, we take it from the blogs to the logs, the log in, you know, because we really think that this warrants that. It's not just something we can kiki and crackle about. It's something that needs to be on the alert so that when people Google Darius Crooks, they don't treat him like a Bossip thing or some shade room thing, but they're looking at him like, oh, the same publication that's covering Trump, the same publication that's covering Bernie Madoff and these other types of people is the same people that's covering this man, because what he's doing warrants a level of journalism and introspection and investigation that deserves that type of attention. And I just feel like many times when things happen in the black community that's impacting us specifically, our stories are often treated like, oh, this is just a sidebar entertainment, this is a laugh, rather than actually this matters. So it was important for me to, once I started to see that this wasn't going away, and I started to see that there was actually more coming, I said, rather than jump in and do the several punches in 1 week, let's see how this continues to evolve. Let me hear what he is saying. Let me see how he's responding. So then let the audience know and the readers know, okay, in spite of all these allegations, this man is doing all kinds of ducking and dodging and curving from the accountability. Period.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also with the journalist, one way I was disappointed, I'm still disappointed, is that I have a very diverse following. And there's a lot of food writers that follow me, white food writers, that work for major food outlets. I should say black and white food writers, but I want to specifically talk about like a lot of, and it's mostly white women.
Okay.
So it's just like for a couple of years now to post, in support of Black Lives Matter, and whenever there's something going up and you guys put your black squares up and you want to go out of your way to make us feel included in this industry and right the wrongs of the past. Now, how is it that you see me yelling at the top of my lungs on my timeline, and any other day you would be interacting with my feed, and now you see me talking about this scammer, this food blogger who is plagiarizing, who is scamming people in the industry, like bad business deals, like all of that, and bad food on top of it. You see all of that, and you look the other way. Why? Because the victims didn't matter to you. And I have an issue with that, because if this story had been some famous white food blogger that everybody knew, I love Spin Kitchen. I'm not throwing her name out just to be messy or anything.
Oh, of course.
If it was Smitten Kitchen, if it was just a name that everybody recognized, and it was discovered that this famous food blogger was a scammer, everybody would be all over the story. But because it was a black cook and it was mostly black women that he's targeting, nobody cared.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how
it was just disappointing to watch it play out in real time, So I'm curious, like, I don't have a lot of faith in some of my own peers at this point, because I think a lot of the things that they've been saying over the years are truly falling short when they have an opportunity to do something. And there are some, and it's not all of them.
Right.
You know, the writer from Forbes that reached out was white. There's a writer from Eater that I was working with prior to this situation.
Oh, good.
And she was very, very like just really wanting to help get my story out and recognizing that it hadn't been featured in a mainstream publication.
Yeah,
so there are.
Eater would be eating this. Eater would be eating this up. Bon appetit.
Well, I think
what
this
about
is.
Bon appetit?
I think Eater.
You know.
That too. I think Eater is one of those publications that from my understanding, it's just like because this crosses over into multiple states. Like that's how crazy it is.
Right.
So I think that will be one of the pieces that we will see come out later, because they'll do like a real deep dive into like the restaurant stuff and the stuff that really hits in the food industry. But I wasn't seeing anything. It's just like, come on, like some of you people work for New Yorker, New York Times, Bon Appetit, Food and Wine, like. Nothing, like not even like a DM, like, hey, is there something more to this? Like, what do you want me to do? Is there something that we could write? Like, I could tweet out 20 different pitches right now to writers about the story, and it was just interesting to watch, like to listen, and it was just crickets. So I think there's just like there's so many ways in which like we are turning we're just kind of letting these kind of situations go unchecked, and at the heart of it I think is in our community anyways, going back to the Black community, the way that we ignore abuse is very similar to how you mentioned with the scams, the people, or it's the shame and the embarrassment. Well, it's similar with abuse, where we know when there's bad characters in our families, and they've gotten away with it. You know, unfortunately, it's just, I don't know what it will take. I think there's maybe just so many people that haven't dealt with the abuse in their own life that they're unwilling to call it out.
Right.
And, you know, with others. So it's a little bit of that. And I think it's devaluing the work of recipe writers, of Black women who cook. That devaluation is why people don't even look at it as like when we talk about the plagiarism, it has still been this kind of thing that just, it's like secondary to everything else at this point. But that was important, you know, and I was very, very disturbed, because I personally had gone out of my way to just kind of move past like the stealing recipes thing, because it's hard to prove. It is. Right. It's hard to prove when recipes are stolen. Recipes are very, very hard to have any kind of copyright protection.
Correct.
But when you see a consistent pattern and you know your own work and you see trends, it's like we all know when it's happening to us. And even if we can't prove it in a court of law, it's just, you know, when it's happening, and it's a very frustrating thing to even have to call out, because most people will not be on your side, as we've seen. But me personally, I had tried to move past that part of the conversation as well, because there was just like actual crimes, you know, to get into. And then when I went back, started looking through his content and I saw his ebooks for the first time, I mean, my jaw was like on the floor. The man plagiarized my whole holiday ebook, and it was a piece of work that meant so much to me, and it really was just like the cornerstone of what enabled me to make this pivot into food full time, and to see somebody rip off my work, it was pretty devastating. And that's when it bothered me, because at the heart of this, there's a lot of Black women, and it's not just Darius, who have had their work taken in that way, or been erased from the things that they actually created, and it just gets twisted into like this cheapened version of the original work that we did and we put the time in to create, to really help people. And it's just kind of sick to see it used as like this tool just to make a quick dollar.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, you know, just overall reflection, of course, and wrapping up, and getting your final thoughts. I think one of the things that has been the thing I've learned from this entire process is that no matter how much we have social media and all of these various channels and work and things we can do to, you know, hold these people accountable and call them in, I guess, or call them out, right, when they don't get called in. There's still this collective need for people to mobilize on this, that as much as it might be glaringly obvious to us, to people like us, that this is a problem, there's still, no matter how much technology, no matter how much we think common sense is common, there still has to be this collective sense of organizing across state lines, virtually, digitally, to get people to see this. And so I guess my last thoughts to you, and I guess my last question and everything, is what do you think, what do you predict, how do you predict this will end if you was a betting woman today? How do you think this will play out, I guess?
I honestly believe that he will self-destruct on his own because he's making some very poor business decisions. The things that he's selling are just not quality. And I think that will backfire. I think the events will backfire because he overbooked himself and probably won't be able to fulfill the schedule. And then we'll see the same issues come up that have always come up with cancellations and refunds. And this time it will be a confirmation that everything that we have been saying was true, and he won't get away with the same excuses. And I think that's where it will probably blow up. At the same time, I think the investigations that will happen as a result of everything that's kind of been exposed with whatever the legalities of the things that he's doing, like credit repair, running the pound cake company with no health inspections, those things are going to catch up to him because now there's the appropriate authorities are aware of everything going on. The financial schemes that came back up from his past, everything is out in the open now, and there's going to be people with eyes on it that are going to care enough to do something. So, we can only guess how long some of those things might take, but I think that he will self-destruct on his own before any of this. I really do. And then beyond that, I think that the more material he continues to give with harassing people, and he seems to still not understand what doxing is, those kind of things will come back to bite him as well, because these platforms will not take kindly to that. That's not sustainable. You're not going to be able to get away with widespread abuse like that and think that Instagram won't shut you down or Facebook won't shut you down once enough people make noise about it.
Agreed. 100%. I think where we're at now, I think that pride will come before the fall. I think that where we're at now is that tipping point. And I think there is a tipping point. A good example I think of is what happened to Patrisse Cullors Khan, who was one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter. There have been some speculation for many years. I was like, damn, I was hearing things and people just kept looking and just saying that it's just something, the transparency, the money, what's going on. And I remember that earlier this year, there was that story that came out about all these houses she owned, and they were multi-million-dollar properties, and she was in predominantly white neighborhoods, and she tried to do the media spin of saying that the people that's criticizing her are white supremacists, and there was not. I mean, there were white supremacists are always criticizing. That ain't the point. But there was some black people in the movement, organizers that were black women that were for a long time being critical of the way that this organization was operating their money. And when they started to talk about that house and people started to see those properties and that money, it just started to get real funny to a lot of people. And she quickly, stepped out, resigned from that position, and we haven't really heard from her since. it's interesting because the same tactic I think is happening to Sean King. People see that he got an over $800,000 5-bedroom house. He wants to act like that is no biggie, but people are like, wait a minute, 800 some $1,000 house, but you was asking cash app and asking money for your wife. You was asking cash app for your wife the other month. Like, what's
and those
going?
Are the kind of
what we doing?
Those
bro?
are questions we need to ask. You know,
these
like,
are questions we need.
What, Darius? Like, why are you in a 9-bedroom house, but you're ripping off your designer for $4,000 and you can't pay a $600, invoice to your carpenter, and he had to put a lien on your property. Like, this is a millionaire that's not paying his bills.
Right. Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Right.
And but to put it in front of your followers, like to show off your vacations and your new homes and your renovations, but then the receipts
to Dubai, right?
And that timeline, right? That same timeline show the lawsuits, and they show
$6,000
suing you for bouncing checks. Yeah, like these are public records, and when you match them up to the same period of time where he's flaunting these things that he's buying, I mean, I think that's questionable.
So exactly. So we're at that phase where I'm seeing even the biggest defenders of Sean King being like, this is irreprehensible. Not the, doxing of black people, not the, grifting, trying to sell a book off of Chadwick Baldwin's death at the same, Chadwick Boseman's death at the same time. Not the none of the lies over the years, none of the random, he's done so much shit, it's countless. None of those things matter, but somehow when people see the properties, the lifestyle, that changes everything. And so I'm seeing the Patrice Cullors effect on Sean King right now. I'm seeing how people are starting to be like, hold up, you live in large. He's trying to downplay it, but they're like, no. He's trying to Malcolm X it too. He's like, oh, well, they're coming after me. They're trying to kill me. They're trying to do this. Bruh, nobody's trying to kill you.
No.
What it is that all of this that you're spending money on, this lifestyle, does not match with the narrative you've been putting out there. The same man who was talking about he was going for broke, that had mental health issues, is the same man that's out here trolling and antagonizing black women's mental health, while also at the same time claiming they're a millionaire and not paying people and doing right by the same people and community that he claims he loves, right? So all of this is hitting that wall. And I agree with you. I think that in his pursuit, because see, it's easy to fuck up when there's no one looking at you. But when everybody's looking at you and you done brought all these mirrors and these cameras onto you and you are like talking high shit, it's time for you to either perform or don't. And I do agree with you. I think that with all of the traction he's brought to himself, he can't afford to fumble like he did 5-10 years ago. He can't afford to say, look, I made a mistake, everybody got paid, it's over. Oh, it's done at that point. And so I agree with you. I think that the self-destruction, it will inevitably happen because the pride will be before the fall. Any final thoughts before we close? Any last thoughts you want listeners to know about you, your work, the situation? Something you want to just say?
Well, people can follow me. Yes. I do cook. Everybody, it's like people have kind of twisted it into this like version of like my life has just been 100% about Darius, and that's not the case. So
no, you're still putting up great content
I have 3 cookbooks that are available for sale. I have a blog. I don't blog anymore, but my recipes are at kitchenistadiaries.com. And my new content is posted usually to Instagram, IGTV, or my Reels. So, I actually enjoy teaching people how to cook and talking about food. And that's why I'm here. And that's why I care so much about all of this.
Phenomenal. Well, this is going to be a great, I think, I just know that there will be a lot to be shared and talked about, when people get their ears on this, which will be immediately. So this is great. Thank you so much for being like my first like real guest. I love my bestie, but like he's thank you for being my first like unfamiliar guest or unfamiliar guest.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, when you was telling me how much, it was like I was nervous. I was like, can I pull this off? But it works. It works.
I didn't know this was going to be like the full, when we talked about it, I didn't even realize it was going to be like the full episode. So This is cool.
Yeah, this is not like a little segment. This is like a special. I wanted a special edition. Cool. I want to just flesh it out, leave it all on the table. just let everybody know this is what I've been talking about. So, because a lot of my listeners was like, well, I know some of it. I'm reading some, but like, I want to know about her. They really want to know about you. I mean, of course, Darius is never going to come on this show, but I just know a lot of people wanted to know about you. So, thank you so much for being on. I appreciate you.
Thank you. And I got to make my way out to Philly. There's a few people I need to see out there. So we got to do a little food tour.
Totally. No, I'm here for it.
All right.
Thank
you. Good talking to you.
You too. Ernestly Speaking is recorded in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and SoundCloud. To stay up to date with the latest on the show, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Mr. Ernest Owens. Use the hashtag Ernestly Speaking to tell me what you thought about this episode, and check out my website at ernestowens.com.